The Mental Sphere, Meher Baba Part 2. Good morrow, this is Chris speaking from Wake Up, and today I want to talk some more about Meher Baba and his spheres. Well, not his spheres, but how he explains them. Meher Baba and Sri Aurobindo were the two gurus, teachers, whatever you want to call them, who reached beyond enlightenment, all the way to Jesus level, which doesn't seem to be something that can be maintained for a long time, but they reached there at some point for some time. So they had a very deep insight of all the levels of consciousness up to merging with the universe or the divine or whatever you want to call it. Last time I talked about the gross and the subtle sphere, link is below in the description. Now I want to talk some more about the subtle sphere, especially the mental sphere. If you walk through that gateless gate between gross and subtle sphere, you're awake. But you're still in the first plane. And that's where most people stay. If you move on to what I call the pre-love phase, because I don't have a really good name for it, but it's something like teal in spiral dynamics, you already start to get what energy is. The whole subtle sphere is about energy, and the more you get how energy works, the more so-called powers you get. First occult powers in the first three planes, and then in the fourth plane divine powers. Those are called siddhis. And everyone who has siddhis agrees that you should use them as sparingly as possible. They are the biggest temptation and the biggest danger in the subtle sphere if you want to move on towards enlightenment. So don't use them. It can also cause a crash and you fall out of it, and best case scenario you have to start from the beginning. So the third plane is what I call the love phase, and the fourth plane is what I call the universal love phase. But for Meher Baba, they're all the subtle sphere. It's all about energy. And it's not a non-dual place yet. You're not totally free of thoughts and emotions and so on. This is only happening in the mental sphere. There's a threshold in the fourth plane towards enlightenment. He calls it the threshold. And the fifth plane, the first part of the mental sphere, is what most people call enlightenment. It is the start of non-duality. And in the fifth plane, you learn how to let go of your thoughts. Or you control your thought body, whatever you call it. The sixth plane, which is the second part of the mental sphere, is where you can let go of your feeling body. This is something that only Bernadette Roberts describes in detail, no one else, not even Sri Aurobindo and Meher Baba. So far I've only read it in Bernadette Roberts' books. Who also got there? The second half of the mental sphere, the sixth plane, which I usually call in my videos beyond enlightenment. But for Meher Baba, it's a second half of enlightenment, basically. It's a second aspect. Most famous teachers, most famous real gurus, not fake gurus, but real gurus, they got there. They got all the way to the sixth plane, the second half of the mental sphere, but they couldn't stay there. There seems to be a very uncomfortable place to stay. First half, yes, the fifth plane, but the sixth plane is something that seems to be very stressful for the body. And also really weird because there are no emotions left. You have to let go of this love thing. Yeah, that all that love and universal love that you developed in the subtle sphere, you have to let go of them in the mental sphere. And there's a big nothing left. And it feels like you're really dissolved. It feels like death. It feels like you're torn apart. It's too big. It's too big in energy to behold in a human body and mind. This is the end of the journey, but it's not the end of the journey. There's even a step beyond. Meher Baba calls it the seventh plane. It's beyond the mental sphere when you really, really jump down the last abyss. Listen to the Sri Aurobindo Savitri video, The Pursuit of the Unknowable. In that part of his Savitri, he describes that. But the whole Savitri is actually a description of all the stages of consciousness. And the moment you perceive the divine as it is, in its pure form, in its pure consciousness, not veiled by any gross sphere, mental sphere, or subtle sphere, unveiled, unbridled, undiluted, pure consciousness, pure divinity, that seems to be very scary. I don't know this state of consciousness, very few people do. It's what some people call the avatar stage. You're merging with the universe, with the divine. There's no difference anymore. There's probably no difference anyway, but at that point you really realize that. And there's no self left. All feeling of self is finally dissolved and there's only consciousness. So you really stop existing as an individual. That's it. You're really dead. But as consciousness, as embodied consciousness, you still live on, and this is called the avatar consciousness, something like Jesus or Buddha or Mohammed. Although those have probably been several people. As far as I know, Jesus has been a group of people. All those disciples, most of them were enlightened, and some of them, more than one, were at this avatar level. But in recent years, two people reached this level, and those were Sri Aurobindo and Meher Baba. And that is why they could write about it. They tried to put it into words. I read here a paragraph of Meher Baba. It is only after the final annihilation of the mind and the wearing out of the curtain of mental impressions that consciousness can function in full freedom from all impressional bindings. This means crossing the deep abyss which separates the sixth from the seventh plane. The seventh plane is the formless abode of the highest of the high. The most high of the infinite God of truth can be realized only by transcending the entire realm of imagination. Only in this seventh plane does the soul fulfill the urge for self-knowledge and experiencing its own self as identical with the unchanging, eternal, indivisible, and formless Oversoul, with infinite knowledge, infinite reality, infinite power, and infinite bliss. So there is in the human being a built-in urge to realize itself as pure consciousness. That is why we are looking for it, and that's why it's possible. If the universe, if the divine would not want us to recognize it, then it wouldn't happen. Of course, in the moment everyone realizes that he or she is the divine, the whole illusion would disappear and the world would end. That is why it's made difficult to get there. But it is possible, and the mental sphere and the seventh plane are only possible by divine grace. You don't get there by your own efforts or will. You get lifted up there, permitted to go up there. That's the meaning of grace. And while your power is almost infinite in the sixth and seventh plane, you don't use it. All and everyone who has ever gotten there says they don't use their power. Unless it is their fate to change something in the big illusion of Maya. But then they are also not using it voluntarily, but they're using it involuntarily because it's part of the big plan. So in the mental sphere, you finally get to the non-duality phase that most people call enlightenment, but there are, according to Meher Baba, two kinds of enlightenment. The first is concerned with freedom from the mind, and the second with freedom from feelings. And the second one is, according to him, true non-duality. To get from the subtle sphere into the mental sphere, you have to let go of powers, of cities, because they will still strengthen your sense of ego. And you have to surrender. You get lifted into the mental sphere if you surrender. That is why Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga are such a big thing. It's about surrender. And once you're in the mental sphere, you surrender even more and let go of even more, until there's almost nothing left. That is why UG is talking about it. He says there's nothing special about it. He's empty. Yeah, that's why. UG managed to stay in this sixth plane probably longer than anyone else. Sri Aurobindo and Bernadette Roberts too, but otherwise most people, they couldn't stand being in that emptiness of the beyond enlightenment thing, of the sixth plane. So once you have experienced this total emptiness, most people go back to the fourth or fifth plane, or even the third plane, because it's more comfortable to stay there in practical day-to-day life. Jed McKenna also mentions this. He says that the space, the time between awakening and enlightenment, is the time that is most fun. After enlightenment, it's not so much fun anymore, because there's no one left to experience the fun. For me, the most interesting aspect of this whole explanation is that there is an urge, there's an inbuilt urge in the human species, in the human mind, in the human energy, that wants to wake up, wants to be enlightened, wants to re-merge with the divine. Now, the famous drop of rain that dissolves into the ocean. So this is also part of the game. The universe, the divine, creates a big illusion, but its inhabitants, its participants can wake up from this illusion. The possibility is always there. Only when you do this, you're not part of the illusion anymore. Game over. The end of individuality, and you are the singular divine again. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for joining me on Facebook or Patreon. And see you soon.